Welcome, everyone. Hi, my name is Sylvia Marshall. I am an intern with the American Food History Project at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History and a graduate student at UNC Charlotte. Thank you for joining us today for the Wiki Focus Black Women in Food History, a Wikipedia edit-a-thon co-hosted by our museum and the Smithsonian Women's History Initiative with the support from Wikimedia DC. As we get started, I would like to offer you some brief remarks about the significance of our collaborative efforts today. There are numerous chefs and cookbook authors that are easily recognizable across America. You hear the names and you instantly know their work. However, there are several people whose impact on food history are not as well known. As an intern with the Food History Project, I began to realize that there are many names I have never heard of in relation to food before. Often these lesser known names belong to women, especially women of color. The absence of Black women cooks and culinary innovators on Wikipedia does a great disservice to the field of food history. We would like to encourage all of you today, as you begin to create and edit Wikipedia pages of these women, to think about the impact of your work. We encourage you to think of food and food history in a broader way. The story of women in food history goes beyond being a successful chef. At every level of the food sector, there are women involved. Black women were a driving force in these sectors, but their work is often overlooked. We are here today to address their absence in Wikipedia and to increase the representation of Black women in food. And it brings me much joy to introduce our special guest for today, LaDeva Davis. She is one of the African-American women whose story and impact as a TV food chef we seek to make known during this edit-a-thon. Ladiva Davis, a native of Philadelphia, is the first African-American woman to have her own nationally broadcast public TV cooking show on PBS. From 1975 to 1976, Davis hosted the television show What's Cooking, where she prepared budget-friendly, highly nutritious meals. But her talent goes beyond cooking. Davis is an accomplished choreographer and performer and a beloved educator at the dance department, director at the Kappa High School for the Creative and Performing Arts in Philadelphia. Ladiva Davis, I just wanted to start by asking you, how did you become the host of What's Cooking?
Well, it goes way back to before 75. I was teaching at Bartlett Junior High School, and I was teaching music. They had it was a pretty strange situation because it was a school that had two gang factions, one from Fifth Street and one from 13th Street, South Philadelphia, and they gang warred every day. And so they'd had different. My bachelor's is in music, and they'd had 11 different music teachers in 7 years, and the last one was a man, and he had been literally physically thrown down the stairs trying to stop a fight or something. And so when they gave me the job, they said, "You don't have to stay there. But we've seen you grow up in high school, and we've seen you grow up through college, and you're a pretty crazy little girl. And if anybody's crazy enough to stay there and put a program together, it just might be you." So I did. I said, "Let me give it to me. I'm from the neighborhood anyhow." And so I stayed there 12 and a half years. So in that 12 and a half years, during the late 60s, when it was fashionable to be Black and wear dashikis and beads, if you remember that era, of course, all of you are way too young, so go to the history book and look it up. All right. And I had an African dance group. Okay. And so word got around about this group. And I had the boys learned to play the conga drums. And so there was a conga drum line. And I got some parents who knew how to sew and made some costumes, and we put that all together, and I put some choreography there, and we did some trips around to various schools and whatnot. And like I said, word got out that we were doing this. PBS picked it up and came to the school, Channel 12, and said, can we do some videoing you or and I said, sure. Well, they videoed one number and said, listen, you need to come to the station and do a show. This is great. And so I said, okay, well, be careful what you wish for. So I said, well, let me go. And we went and we did the show. And I clown around all the time. No fools, no fun, my father says. So I clown around with the kids and I clown around with the people watching the show as if they were our audience and were there with us and whatnot. And I would say, okay, now I'm going to teach you a step. And I would go to the camera and I'd say, da 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 da, and I would teach it. And I'd say, girlie, you got that wrong. It's your right foot. It's not your left foot. Okay, It's the other right foot. And whatever. They got all kinds of reviews and raves reviews about that. And the next thing I know, I'm getting a phone call. Hello, can you cook? I said, well, my mother's from the South and I'm African American, so I guess the answer is yes. And they said, well, we're going to get a state board panel of nutritionists to work with you if this works out. I said, okay. So they said, pick three things that you're going to do, and we'll put a little menu together. I said, okay. And I went on in, and they had a little kitchen area that they wanted me to work in. And I did the show, and it was a pilot. And next thing I know, uh, they like the show. So 100 PBS stations across the nation have bought the show, including Guam, Alaska, and the Virgin Islands. Can you do it this summer? Well, before he said, "Can you do it this summer?" I was off the phone and in the car and at the station. Okay, so that's how I got the show. And of course, like they said, they got a state board panel of nutritionists to put everything together. And I would go in at 6 o'clock in the morning with one eye open and a toothpick in the other one, and say, riboflavin is in this, and vitamin A is in that, and vitamin B. Okay, there's B3, B12, B so and go on and so forth and so on, and then learn to read the teleprompter so that if there was a brain part, then I would have information that I could pull from on the teleprompter or the cue cards or whatever. And so I talked to the camera like they were in my house and they were in my kitchen and they were sitting across from me at the counter. And girl, let me tell you what we made last week. And so and so and so, you gotta make this at your house. And how many kids you got? And apparently it worked. So that's the rest is history.
That's honestly so amazing, and especially coming from your background in performance, how was it? Could you describe the feeling of being on a television cooking show? How you felt in those first few days of what's cooking?
I was nervous as a cat. It's one thing I've been singing and dancing all my life. Started out at the age of 4 on a radio show that came on Sunday mornings called Parisian Taylor Kitty Hour, and I was a regular, and it came out of the Royal Theater in Philadelphia. Oh, that's something you didn't know, Paula. I forgot to tell you about that one. Anyhow, so and I was used to dancing because my mother sent me to dancing school when I was 6. So I was used to the recitals on stage. Sydney King School of Dance I went to, and then from there I went to Judamar and whatnot. And they always had these very grand recitals, and of course I love that sort of thing. And I was featured in a few numbers. I remember being because my father taught me to play the ukulele, and they got wind of that at the dancing school, and she wanted to do a Hawaiian number. And so, well, Dee Dee was the nickname. Dee Dee can sing. So Dee Dee's got a ukulele. So we're going to do Blue Hawaii. And Dee Dee was featured. And that show was at the Academy of Music because that was the stage that they rented out. And so, I had been, and my father would get these hoofers that he knew that would come in because he had a pool room on South Street and it was across from the Pep Bar. And the Pep Bar had a lot of entertainers come in there. And they would come across, and some of them liked to play pool. And they would come across the street and play pool in my father's pool room. And if they could tap dance, if they were a tap dancer, then he would play them a game of pool, beat them, and then they would have to come to the house and teach me tap. Okay. So I was singing and dancing, all my life. But cooking, that's something you did in the kitchen if mama helped you, or if there was a dish that you like to do, and then you got your brother to help you, and he would wash the dishes, and but do it on the television in front of all of these people, uh like like the song says, must have been some other body, honey, wasn't me. But apparently, I learned to be a little more comfortable after the first two or three shows. I remember doing a show. I was so nervous. And Paula doesn't know this story either, but that she gonna fall out the chair. And I was making these little meatballs, and I was talking and everything, and I was so nervous. And I was supposed to make the tomato sauce, and roll up the meat, and make the little balls, and put them aside, and then one by one plop them down in the sauce. Girlfriend rolled up the ground meat and put the whole ball of meat in the sauce, and I could hear the director saying, "Oh my God, what is she making? Dog food? What is that?" I'm like, "Okay, I'm fired." But because my nerves just took over. I mean, but after a while I became comfortable, and it began to be fun, and it was fun to do, and we would we would run out of things, or I would eat things while I'm making stuff, you know, and I would still clown around. We had one show where a fly was in this at the set, and Paula didn't know about this one either. And the same day, the we had a resident cat that was in the studio, and it was kind of hanging out, but it decided to jump up on the counter and walk across the counter while I was making something one of these days. And I said, "Oh, that's Claude. But he pays big rent, so we let him stay here." Okay. And by that time, Claude was gone. I didn't know where the hell this cat came from. And I'm like, okay, somebody tell me something about this cat. But in the meantime, the fly, it kept jumping down on the counter and being annoying. And I kept hitting at it and trying to swat it away, and it would come back. It would come back. It would come back. So finally, I had a wooden spoon. Now, of course, this would never happen again in a million years. But I had a wooden spoon, and I was talking, and I said, "And I'm going to get this so and so. I'll fix him. I got his number now." And I went pop. And as luck would have it, I got it. I actually got it. And I held it up to the camera, and I said, "Come in my kitchen unannounced and see what happens to you." And I threw it over my shoulder, and it landed in the sink. It was a rehearsal tape, but they kept it. I'm never going to be able to do that again. You may, if you're going to keep anything, keep this one. So, to answer your question, after the first two or three, I became more comfortable, and I just did my thing. And I would sing when we made the eggs. I had eggs in my hand, and I started the show with "Keep Your Sunny Side Up, Up," and I would dance around and talk to the food. That's kind of it. I had a fiasco with some nutmeg, and I wound up talking to the nutmeg And I ran around the kitchen looking for the nutmeg because they held up a cue card that said "Nutmeg, you fool," because I forgot to put the nutmeg on it. And so I went over to the oven, sprinkled the nutmeg in. I said, "Y'all know what?" Because I would describe everything. So I'd say, "You know what nutmeg looks like? It's brown and it's sprinkles, okay?" And I put it in there and shut the door. And I went, "Now, where was I?" You know, just just shtick, as they call it. You know,
Yeah, it seemed like you had so much fun and you were
hey,
a charismatic force on the show. And your aprons really reflected that. You donated several of them to the museum. Could you talk about these aprons and their significance during the filming of What's Cooking?
yeah, I was at some sort of sidewalk thing, you know, and saw these aprons. And the lady said, and I said, "Oh my goodness." I said, "These are great. I'd love to have these." And she said, "Take them. Nobody else wants them." And I said, "Well, I got to give you something." She said, $5. Girl, I gave her more than five, okay? And took all of them and wore a different one on each show. And I mean, they all had a different say. And everybody wanted to, well, everybody wanted one of those aprons, but I kept them. I don't know where. I think I have two or three hanging around somewhere here. I will finally, when the show was over, those that I didn't give to you all for the museum, I gave to other people who some 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 people. My second grade teacher was living in Arizona. I sent one to her. She had to move to Arizona because of her health, and but she sent me a letter. I read all my fan mail and I answered them, and because I thought if if people take time to write to me, I should write back to them. And she wrote me this letter, and after I got finished crying because it was my second grade teacher, um, and wiping my nose and everything, I sat down and wrote her a letter, and I sent her one, and a few other people that I hadn't heard from in years. I sent them one. Um, Guy Ira Tucker Jr. We went to we knew each other since we were 13, and he saw me on the show on TV. He was in L.A. or somewhere, and I gave him one. You know, they got they're still around living somewhere with folks.
Yeah, they're amazing aprons. They're beautiful, they're colorful, they're witty, just like you. And
Oh, thank
so
you, thank you.
a lot of people recognize, the driving force behind What's Cooking, and you were featured in the Essence magazine, where they described you as the chef and a saucy host of What's Cooking, and said that with her blend of humor and warmth, she can't miss. How did you feel about being such a feature in such a prominent magazine for one, and then becoming such a recognizable figure in America, especially as an African American woman?
Listen, when I thought I had arrived, as they say, when I was in the Philadelphia Bulletin, and it said she's a shoe in for stardom or something, and another one with a whole page with the uh, Sunday Inquirer. But baby, girlfriend felt like I was 6 feet 7. Okay, when I made it to Essence magazine and Women's Day, that was it for me. Because I was getting into all these other, I was getting into a lot of newspapers and the New York Times. The New York Times hates everybody, and they like me. And I'm like, that's a good thing. So that, but because I was reading Essence magazine, and I was like, wow, this is some kind of magazine. And when they put my little ugly face in there, I was through. I was absolutely through. I just I, that was it. I didn't have to do any. That was it. That was it. I felt like I had pass arrived, you know. So
And you did arrive. Um, and so for this final question, I really want you to be reflective, so to speak. What sorts of lessons did you learn from being the host of What's Cooking?
when you say lessons, do you mean cooking wise or dealing with people?
Just in general, what did you take from that amazing experience as a performer, um, as a dancer?
Well, I think that the main thing that I learned from that show was that everybody's got to eat. And it didn't make any difference what walk of life they came from. It seemed like that if it could have been a teacher, an engineer, another cook, a bus driver, whatever, from the fan mail that I got, it was like, okay, this is the kind of thing that touches people, and just being real. Didn't Don't put on any airs, you know, don't try too hard. Everybody's comfortable in their kitchen. So if they're comfortable with you in your kitchen, then it will work. And I had every modern little gadget known to man in this kitchen. You know, I had everything that you could ask for. And this was like other women could relate to that and could say, oh, she did this with a blender, or she did that with a toaster, or okay, she didn't have this, but she's got that, and she's making it work. And that's, I learned how to make things work, you know? And I learned how kind people are and how amenable they are when they're being fed. And I didn't get one piece of negative mail. And I learned that, and not one piece, not one piece. You kind of look surprised, but not one piece. If I did, then they kept it from me. Um, and I certainly got enough that I had plenty to read. And I just learned that it's just nice to be nice, you know? Just be yourself. Don't put on any airs. Just be yourself. And people will like you in most cases. And I share that with my students. Just be yourself.
Mhm.
Do the best that you can do. Be the best that you can be, and be yourself. And it'll be just fine. That's what I did.
That is some great advice that I hope we can all take with us. Um, and so now I want to thank you, Ladiva, for taking the time to speak with us. We've enjoyed your stories. My cheeks hurt from smiling and laughing. You have been such an inspiration to people in the food field and outside of it. And we are glad that we were able to hear your story and that we'll be able to share your story along with other African American women in food history during this Wikipedia edit-a-thon. We have created a short slideshow of objects and documents donated to the National Museum of American History by our guest today, LaDeva Davis, which was donated roughly 10 years ago. Davis donated these objects while we were researching stories for our exhibition, Food Transforming the American Taste, which is still on view in the museum. These objects relate to LaDeva Davis's cooking show, which premiered 45 years ago in 1976. And I hope you enjoy the slideshow.